Yo, it's Kajan Clark here, and I am here to explain to you why the Black Lives Matter movement actually matters. I made this video for a symposium I did back in 2017, 2016, and I'm just getting around to make the video. Please forgive me. I do think this video is very important because I think that there is an incredible misconception about the purpose of the Black Lives Matter movement. I think a lot of people have misconstrued what the Black Lives Matter movement is trying to do. That's why I'm making this video. So if you're interested in why the Black Lives Matter movement actually matters, give me the next 7 to 8 to 11 minutes of your time. So the Black Lives Matter movement is so important because of the previous gains for society of Black liberation movements. When I say previous gains, I mean social justice gains. Gains that ensure a proper administration of the law, irrespective of people's religion, race, creed, and what have you. Another focal point of previous Black liberation movements that make the Black Lives Matter movement so important are civil rights. Civil rights, we all know what civil rights are, we should, but civil rights being the rights of individuals to receive equal treatment under the law, including education, employment, housing, and equal protection of their rights. Previous Black liberation movements have done a great job, an incredible job, come hell or high water, in making America and forcing America to keep its promise of being a democratic republic, keeping its promise of affording constitutional rights to all of its citizens. Based off this fact, the Black Lives Matter movement already has validity because of what previous Black liberation movements have been able to accomplish. I will move on. So there are two major Black liberation movements that I would like to just shed a little bit of light on. The Black Power movement and the Black Panther Party. Both of these Black liberation movements working in conjunction to create or to bring forth into American society the civil rights movement and the civil rights laws that came out of the civil rights movement. I will move on. If you know anything about the Black Power movement, you know that it was spearheaded by a man named Stokely Carmichael. I'm going to read a quote from him real quick. How can you move into the white ghettos of this country and begin to articulate a position for those white students who do not want to go to Vietnam? This highlights the focal point of all Black liberation movements, or I won't say focal point, a residual point that many people who don't study these things understand. All Black liberation movements encompass all those at the bottom of the barrel, as Black people in America have always been forced and subjugated and oppressed, meaning that they've always been the bottom of the barrel. They couldn't just fight for themselves, they had to fight for everyone else. So this quote about how can you go into these white ghettos and explain to them and articulate a point for them as well as Black people, right? Because they are a forgotten portion of American society as well. Poor people, people in poverty, poverty knowing no color in America, despite what they might have you believe. Another quote highlighting the foundational principle of the Black Power movement. The ultimate values and goals of Black Power are not domination or exploitation of other groups, but rather an effective share in total power of the society, since there can be no social order without social justice. This is very important to understand because if you actually read the documentation of Black liberation movements, all of them have this feature in them, this feature of wanting to push America in a more democratic direction of inclusivity of everyone, right? White, black, red, green, it didn't really matter. The nucleus of these movements was obviously Black people, but that wasn't where it stopped, right? The nucleus is not the entire cell. It may be the main part, it may be the middle, but it's not the entire body of the cell. There's many other parts that go into it. So once again, Black liberation movements in America have always encompassed everyone else, especially the Black Power movement. To move on to a more infamous Black liberation movement, the Black Panther Party. I could do a whole 20-minute video on the Black Panther Party, but I will spare you the gritty details of that. I will just say that what the Black Panther Party was doing in their Black community was implemented by the federal government in all other communities. This is another purpose and another incredible feat of Black liberation movements. They take a mirror to the American society, to take a mirror to the federal government and make it look at itself and correct its tie and correct its face and fix itself up to live up to its own standard. Some examples of this, forgive me while I read. First, it was the Black Panther Party's most infamous creation, which was the Free Breakfast for Children program in the morning. They created this first after the rest of American society got wind to what the Black Panther Party was doing. They said, hey, well, we want that for our children as well. All schools should be providing free breakfast for their students. Some other things that the Black Panther Party did first that forced the federal government to create the same systems for everyone was they created medical research clinics in 1971. They had these in all communities that had a Black Panther chapter. In 1978, the government followed suit, creating the U.S. Code 254B for health centers. So when there's a certain amount of people in an area, I think it's 100,000, you have to have a certain amount of clinics to take care of those people, as well as a hospital. I'll move on. Another thing the Black Panther Party did first that the American government had to implement was an EMS system. The Black Panther Party had the People's Free Ambulance Service because many white cops, many white paramedics would not venture into black neighborhoods. You can Google it and look it up. The KKK actually thanked the Black Panther Party for creating such a service because it alleviated unnecessary tension, right? By them creating an ambulance service that was catered to black people, it alleviated the obvious problem of white officers and white paramedics going into all black neighborhoods. The federal government creating an EMS system through the EMS Systems Act in 1973, 2 years after the Black Panther Party had created the EMS service catered to black people. Spoke about that already. I will move on. So now let's get into the tangible social justice gains of previous black liberation movements. Civil rights laws. Law in America, we are an incredibly litigious society. We do a lot of suing, we do a lot of lawsuits, right? Before the black liberation movements started to get going and the civil rights movement came about, there was really no way for you to fight for yourself legally. We all know the history of America, Fred Scott. We still have laws now with all these mass incarceration laws. The war on drugs has created mass incarceration. So we know the power of the law. That being said, black liberation movements have created what are called civil rights laws. Specifically, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act 1964, which prohibits employers from discriminating against employees based off sex, race, religion, creed, and national origin. This is directly from the fight of previous black liberation movements. Because of them, now you have the Civil Rights Act where you can't be discriminated against for your sex, religion, and all that being encompassed in the fight of the Black Power movement and the fight of the Black Panther movement and the continued fight of the Black Lives Matter movement. Also, Civil Rights Act 1968, Section 804, it shall be unlawful to refuse to rent your home to someone based off their religion, race, sex, or if they're married or not. This is another hidden aspect of a social justice gain of black liberation movements, right? No one could have thought that this would be an aspect of it, right? No one put this or gives credit to black liberation movements for this social justice gain of not being denied housing based off your religion, right? How important is this law in 2019 with all that we have going on? I won't go off into a tangent. I will do that later when I explain the validity and the usefulness of the Black Lives Matter movement, which I'm still going to get to. The most important social justice gain of previous black liberation movements, as I spoke about, America being an incredibly litigious society, they created the, let's see, Section 1983 of the U.S. Code 42, or just simply Section 1883, which gives you the right, if you are deprived of your constitutional rights by a law enforcement entity, it gives you a way of bringing suit against that law enforcement agency. And before this law, there was nothing you could do. You were deprived of your constitutional rights. You were pretty much up the river without a boat, right? You were dead in the water, so to speak. This was a way for the federal government to bring about a way to mitigate some of the states and their municipalities that weren't giving people their constitutional rights based off the color of their skin. Now you can sue, right? So based off this law, now you can sue. So if I'm mistreated by the law, I can sue. And if I sue, I can bring down a municipality that would have to pay tax dollars for not affording me my constitutional rights. It's unfortunate that the Black Power movement and the Black Panther Party had to use financial responsibility for depriving people of their constitutional rights to get things to change. But nonetheless, due to the fighting of these Black liberation movements, we have a way, all of us American citizens have a way to combat being mistreated by law enforcement. So with that being said, when you think of the Black Lives Matter movement, what comes to mind? Right? You probably think of the protests for Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Sandra Bland. But see, what should come to your mind when you think of Black Lives Matter movement is an end to the war on drugs, an end to mass incarceration, and a complete revamping of policing in America. This is the reason the Black Lives Matter movement is so important, because of the numerous possibilities that can come about through us allowing the Black Lives Matter movement to flourish, like previous Black liberation movements. Without the Black Panther Party being able to come into existence and being able to organize itself, who knows how long it would have been before we had EMS all around America. Who knows how long it would have been before we were giving children free breakfast and cheaper lunches in schools, right? Without the Black Power movement, who knows how long we would have been in Vietnam? Who knows how many lives would have been wasted and how long the war would have been had the Black Power movement not stepped up and said, hey, no more. Currently, who knows how long the war on drugs would have lasted, or policing in America would have been so negative if the Black Lives Matter movement didn't blow up in 2014, right? Who knew how long were police going to be allowed to ticket you to fund the police department, right? That has been halted, that has been slowly changed due to the riots in Ferguson and the unfortunate killing of Michael Brown. The Black Lives Matter movement has a very unique and purposeful focus, because America wastes so much money, an ungodly amount of money, on locking up people for selling drugs, which has now come to a head of being financially irresponsible on all levels. This is why the Black Lives Matter movement matters, because it's such a progressive thing that we need. As Americans, we have the right to, we have freedom to assemble, and we also have freedom of speech. And with that comes a great responsibility to make America keep its promise of being a democratic republic. And I think that the Black Lives Matter movement is doing that. We have the right against unreasonable search and seizures. We have the right against so many things that other countries are not afforded. And that's why the Black Lives Matter movement is important. So I won't keep you too long. I'm hitting the 15-minute mark here. So when you deal with, or when you look at the streets and you see people rioting, understand the meaning behind and what can potentially come from that. The Black Lives Matter movement has an incredible potential to end mass incarceration, end the war on drugs, and to keep all of us in a more progressive state. There is no reason these things should continue in the manner they have been, and the Black Lives Matter movement is at work day in and day out trying to mitigate and keep America as close to the conception that it promised when it said no taxation without representation as it possibly can. With that being said, I hope you understand. I hope I didn't ramble or speak too fast. I will be doing these videos probably weekly. I'm gonna try to keep it up for you. So before I go, remember, Black Lives Matter. Not just for Black people, but for all people. Thank you.